You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Welcome to Unbiased Science,
where we bring scientific method to the madness.
We're your hosts, Dr. Jess Steier
and Dr. Sarah Scheinman.
And we are back for season 6 of the podcast.
Woo.
It has been quite a summer. We're going to get to that in just a second. But we are so excited to be back. Certainly no shortage of public health and science topics to cover these days. We heard your feedback, by the way. We're going to make some hopefully fun and good changes to the podcast. We're going to try to talk a little less. You all think we're a little long-winded. So we're going to try to keep episodes a little tighter. We're going to kick things off with a little bit of a public health news briefing, which I'll get into in just a second. And we'll still have our signature deep dives on topics, which is what we're known for. So today we are joined by a very special guest, Dr. Matthew Facciani. Hello.
Hi, Matthew. Thanks for joining us.
Hello. It's great to be here.
Matthew is not only a brilliant scientist, he also happens to be a beautiful human being, a very good friend of mine. And so we're going to get into introductions. Actually, let's just get into introductions right now, because then I want to hear about your summers. So hang on. Let me get this very impressive bio loaded. Dr. Matthew Facciani is a researcher at the University of Notre Dame in the Computer Science and Engineering Department. He's an interdisciplinary social scientist with a background in neuroscience and psychology and holds a PhD in sociology. His research focuses on media literacy, misinformation, social networks, political polarization, identities, and artificial intelligence. Beyond academia, I know, oof is right. Beyond academia, Matthew is a passionate science communicator dedicated to making complex social science research accessible to the public. He has written for various media outlets, spoken at national conferences, and hosts Misguided, the podcast. Y'all have to tune into that, where he explores how social and psychological forces shape the way we process and consume information. His new book, Misguided, Where Misinformation Starts, How It Spreads, and What to Do About It, was recently published by Columbia University Press. Major congrats. Of course, we will link to this in our show notes. Through his research and public engagement, Matthew strives to bridge the gap between academia and everyday conversations about truth, trust, and media literacy. Matthew, you're amazing. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here and chat with both of you. And I'm excited to our conversation.
And I love that your mission is to kind of bridge the gap between academia and everyday conversations, because that's kind of what we're all about here on Unbiased as well. Kind of bridging that gap.
Yeah.
Funny you should say that. So I was going to say that Matthew and I, we also work together as part of a collective of science communicators with this shared goal. So Matthew and I we're definitely simpatico. And I was saying that this is the first time that Sarah and Matthew have met. And I feel like there would be just a mutual love fest here. So anyway, with that, how were your summers? Sarah, how was your summer?
Oh my gosh, I had a bit of a busy summer here. I moved location. I'm still in Chicago, but I moved, which is always a big ordeal. And then probably more importantly, I started a new job, so I'm a faculty member now, and I'm full-time teaching and at a new university than I was before. So moving up in the world, I'm super excited to be in this new position, and it gives me just another opportunity to practice what I preach here at the podcast, but like bring it into the classroom as well with my students.
Your students are so lucky to have you. I wish I had you as a professor. That is so awesome. That really is so cool. No,
you're so sweet.
For real. Because you're so, I don't know, intellectually curious, and you bring that out in people and you do it in such a compassionate way. I love it. This is so cool. We're so excited for you. Matthew, how was your summer?
It was good. Also busy. So yeah, my book launch was July. So that was my really the big moment of my summer was preparing for that, and then doing some book events. I was able to speak to a local bookstore, and I'm planning some other events at different universities and different places. So that's been really cool to navigate that whole experience of launching a book and then talking about it.
So
So
cool.
that's been kind of
So
one of the
cool.
highlights of my
Matthew,
summer.
we should talk. Maybe you could come to my university.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. For sure.
I'm already getting jealous.
Because you're just in Indiana, right?
Yeah. So yeah, it's not too far away. But I'm actually, we'll talk offline because I actually have a book talk in Chicago planned that just was announced. So
Oh my gosh.
Cool.
I already have FOMO. That is so cool. So briefly, my summer jam-packed, kids were at camp. We did this little glamping situation in the Berkshires, which was fun. It was my birthday. I turned 39, and my mom's 70th birthday, and we celebrated in New York City, which was really cool. Back to my old stomping grounds. Yep, we were getting into some trouble there, which was a lot of fun. And then I had an essay published in the New York Times, which was totally bananas and like the coolest thing ever. I still can't get over it. I was all about, we can get into it another time, but it was all about how we fear that data could be manipulated to manufacture a false link between vaccines and autism. So yes, jam-packed summer for us all.
And we can link to that essay in the show notes as well. We'll link to that.
Awesome. So let me, if I may, just sort of give a little recap of what's going on in the news right now with public health and science. And honestly, there's no way I could do a recap of the whole summer in 2 minutes. But if you've been following, there's a lot of changes, a lot of turmoil going on in the public health world. There was a horrific shooting at CDC headquarters that led to the death of a police officer who responded to the scene. And unfortunately, it came out that the shooter was motivated by some anti-vaccine sentiments, which really, I think, underscores the importance of this conversation, Matthew. We'll get into the role of misinformation and how it's really leading to a lot of polarization in our country. But I wanted to focus specifically, just in the interest of time, on what's going on around vaccines, because we're about to kick off respiratory illness season, and there's a lot of confusion about the flu vaccine and the COVID vaccine in particular. So, real quick, I think folks know that the CDC's ACIP, which is the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, has been completely overhauled. RFK got rid of the existing committee and replaced it with people some of whom are a little bit controversial in the public health world. We'll leave it at that for now, although we've covered this on our social media and on our Substack, so you can go and check that out. And actually, he just announced, we're recording this on September 4th, but the names of 7 new ACIP members were just dropped. And so there's a lot of turnover there. And people are concerned about what this could mean for vaccine access for us, for our children, for our grandparents, and so on and so forth. So the good news is that when ACIP met in, I think it was June, Matthew, you can correct me if I'm mistaken, I think it was June, they did vote to approve flu vaccines for everyone 6 months and older. This will be an updated formulation. It is available now. It protects against 3 strains of the flu virus. Very important to get your flu shot, of course. Typically recommended to get it in September, October, because protection lasts about 6 months, which carries us through flu season. So my kids and I and my hubby will be getting our flu shots in the next couple of weeks. Last thing I'll talk about for now is the COVID vaccine, which is far more complicated. So the big thing here is that there's a major disconnect between what the federal health agencies are saying versus the professional medical organizations. So the FDA just came out and narrowed the label for COVID vaccines to only those who are 65 years and older, or to people who are between 65 6 months and 64 years who have some sort of a pre-existing condition. The good news there is that the language is kept pretty broad, but the confusion has led, I think it's like 16 or 17 pharmacies around the country have put a pause on COVID vaccines. There's confusion over what will be covered because historically insurance companies will cover whatever the CDC recommends. But then you have these professional medical organizations like the American Academy of Pediatrics who are saying, well, actually, it's really important for kids under 2 years to get it because they're very, very vulnerable to severe disease from COVID, as well as during pregnancy. And the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists has also really emphasized the importance. So there's a lot of upheaval right now. Some states are trying to break from following federal policy and instead following insurance companies. So stay tuned. We'll keep you posted on that. Was that okay? Was that an okay recap?
I'm impressed. That was a very tight summary of like what just went down over the summer.
Yeah, well, there's a lot more, but we'll leave it at that. $500 million of mRNA research funding cut, like a million things that I'm sure people are like, why didn't she mention that? But we have been talking about it again on our social channel and on Substack, so please go and follow along there. All right, Matthew. We are doing a new thing this season where we're kicking off every episode with our guests with a question, which is, what is a news item in the public health science space that caught your attention and why should people care about it?
Yeah, great question. So there's definitely a lot going on. One thing that caught my attention just today actually was a new study by NewsGuard looking at false information spread by AI chatbots. And they did a similar study a year ago, and they found that actually, compared to 2024, the amount of false information when asking AI chatbots about news topics has actually doubled from just last year. So these same chatbots are actually sharing more false information than they did just a year ago. And the reasoning behind that is potentially these chatbots are much less cautious to providing answers than they were before. So before they would say things like, I don't have the most up-to-date information. I can't answer that right now. But now they're programmed in a way where they're much more likely to just try to give you something. And many times that is inaccurate. So that's something that I caught today. And I worry that as these chatbots are being used as a replacement for searching information, people are going to rely on them too much. And they're going to see false information shared by these chatbots who provide them in such a sophisticated way. They make it sound like they know what they're talking about, and they write very well, very confidently, very persuasively, but a lot of times they are not accurate. So that's something that I saw today.
So Matthew, do you think that the direction that we're headed in with this type of thing is that instead of going to, like CNN, MSNBC, a news outlet of your choosing, Associated Press, that people are going to, ChatGPT and typing in like, can you summarize the news that's happening on, September 4th, 2025 in the United States? Is that the type of thing that's happening? And then these chatbots are just producing just stuff that's not accurate?
Yeah, there's definitely more and more people are using them in replacement for search engines. And there was already a biased use of search engines. People would pick their favorite news source. They would pick what resonated most with them. But at least when you used Google, you would have to sort through a few different links and you have some exposure to a diversity of news sources. But now with ChatGPT and other AI chatbots, it's giving you an output very quickly and without showing you the mechanism of how it got to that conclusion. So I worry just more broadly of this we already have this lack of media literacy and critical thinking and digital literacy because it's not really taught in many schools. And it kind of exacerbates this problem where it's forcing people to have this very narrow sense of the world and the information environment they see. And we're not really processing through the complexity of topics. It's like basically ramping it up another notch. Like we already had social media algorithms forwarding us to different echo chambers and things like that. But now AI chatbots are even more personalized and more insular. So I just worry that people are going to rely on them too much to the point of believing a lot of falsehoods.
And I know when I go to Google now, I think there's an AI, right? Like there's an AI
Yeah,
functionality, a summary.
Yeah.
So I
right.
wonder if that would also be impacted. Right.
Yeah, at the top.
Yeah. So it's just integrated in these chatbots now, and a lot of people are not reading beyond that summary,
Right.
and those summaries can be pretty inaccurate. You might have seen inaccuracies with sometimes I'll Google something and it will cite like a scientist that I know and say that they wrote something that I know they didn't write, and it's weird to see things that you personally know are untrue right at the top of these Google results. So that's what I've been thinking about more is as we navigate this evolving information ecosystem, what are the types of pressure points that are going to make us even more vulnerable to believing false information just by the way the mechanism of these chatbots and Google searches are structured?
And then compound that with, correct me if I'm mistaken, but Meta used to have a sort of was it a fact checker functionality, right? That would sort of flag misinformation. And I believe that's been discontinued. Do you know about that?
Yeah, so there's definitely been a lot of updates with the fact-checking world and social media. There's been more of an emphasis on community notes and community fact checks than having an independent fact check. And in some ways, there's some positives here. People tend to like the idea of something being community fact checked more, and there's like a little bit more trust than just having some single source give you the answer. The thing is, of course, people often use those sources in their community notes. So it's kind of like you're seeing the community note via this independent fact check anyway. Ideally, there would be a partnership between these fact-checking organizations and community notes. I think that's the best of both worlds. So there's been less emphasis, less funding. I know different groups who Meta previously funded to do fact-checking and just evaluate information on their platform. There's less funding for that. So that's really what I worry about as well, is the lack of people studying this topic and evaluating this. There's just not a lot of focus in that area right now.
So, Matthew, I have a question for you about the word misinformation.
Yeah.
Because it's so interesting as science communicators, I'm sure you've seen, there's sort of this idea that we shouldn't use that word. And if we use it, people they feel like we're, I don't know, judging them, or I don't know exactly how to articulate what I'm saying. Maybe you could do a better job, but instead we should use words like falsehoods or, other terminology. And obviously in the title of your new book, you include the word misinformation. So I'm just so curious how you feel about that and how, you navigate using that word.
Yeah, it's definitely something I think about a lot. And it's been an interesting journey for me personally, because I've been studying misinformation for over 10 years at this point. And the word originated in psychology literature in like the 80s, talking about false memories and stuff very different than how we think about it today. So it used to be a very apolitical, academic, technical term, just broadly referring to false or misleading information. And that's still the broad umbrella term, false or misleading information. But you're right, it definitely has been politicized. It's been a very polarizing term. And I do think it has been overused to the point where people do feel very negatively about it. So how I use the term misinformation, again, I use it as a broad umbrella term referring to academic work. And I also focus on my own work, which is mostly psychological bias. So my broad level of scholarship that I do is looking at social and psychological factors that influence information processing. So when I think about misinformation, it's not even so much trying to focus on the true or falseness of a particular claim. It's more about how do these different biases shape how we process information. And I found when I've had these conversations about what I do, that's a much easier conversation to have with lots of different people, is just this, okay, we all have these biases. It's all going to misguide us sometimes. And it's important to understand how these processes work so we could be more accurate in how we evaluate information. And then once we're, having some rapport, there's some background about where I'm coming from, Then I can talk about the more formal definitions of misinformation and disinformation and how that is different from like propaganda and stuff like that. But if I'm just meeting someone new and I don't know their background, I try not to use the word misinformation because there's so much baggage associated with it. And again, it really doesn't even capture exactly what I study directly. So broadly, I think it's good to be cautious of using that word, and we should be very clear about why we're using it and try to be transparent about how we determine something to be misinformation versus not, instead of just kind of throwing that hammer down all the time.
So how would you differentiate between, I mean, you also use the word disinformation. I mean, like, I'm just thinking like, I like, how would you differentiate between something that's misinformation versus something that's just incorrect information? Like, just to use an example from biochemistry, because that's one of the classes I'm teaching right now. So if I were to say, like, there is a phosphate functional group in carbohydrate molecules, like, that is just wrong. Like, that's not the definition of carbohydrates. That is incorrect information. So how is something like that different from like misinformation when you were talking about where your biases come into play?
Yeah, so that would be an example of holding. So if someone believes that to be true, that'd be holding a misperception. So that's how we define believing misinformation. Technically, in the literature, it's called misperceptions. But again, misinformation is just that broad umbrella term of false or misleading information. So that would still fall under that category. The difficult thing is describing intent. So that's disinformation, when you're intentionally trying to mislead someone. So if someone really has an agenda about phosphates, then we could say that would be disinformation.
Okay.
But we'd have to know that for sure, that that's their intent. So maybe they have this, I don't know, anti-phosphate group, and they want everyone to have wrong biochemical knowledge, and that's their agenda. Then that would be disinformation, especially if we knew that for sure. But misinformation is just the broad, false or misleading information that captures lots of stuff.
Okay.
So, Matthew, the billion-dollar question that I get asked all the time, and I'm going to now ask you, is how do we as science communicators combat misinformation? And then two, I'd be curious if you can help people who aren't science communicators, who are in the general public, how can they safeguard themselves against misinformation?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's such a big question that I think it's important to think about even the level at which you're trying to tackle this issue. So, on a micro level, which is often what I think about how our own biases can influence how we process information. And my perspective as a social scientist, I often think about our identities and how our identities can motivate us to process things that are consistent with those worldviews we have. So broadly, how I think about identities, they're just sets of meanings and values that we think are important to us. And they provide us with self-esteem. So you can have we all have thousands of identities. And many times they're good. They help us connect with other people. So like if you have a student identity, you might want to study and get a good grade, and that makes you feel good about yourself. So again, that's a very good thing. Or maybe you belong to a social group or a sports team and you get along with those people and they provide you with social support and self-esteem. So a lot of good things. The issue is whenever we have identities that motivate us to process information in a way that's inaccurate. And one of the big examples of this is political identities. And that's why I talk about that in my own work, and how a lot of people who are in this field often use political identities because they're so polarized in the US. There's a very clear in-group and out-group. It's just easy to study from a social science perspective as well. And when we have this strong motivation to protect our identities, the way we process information can be very different. And we might, avoid reading something that challenges our identity, or focus on something that attacks the opposing group and think that's more likely to be true. So one of the things that I talk about is like, okay, how do we reduce this bias that we all have? And a big way to do it is simply to diversify the set of identities that we have that are important to us. So as an extreme example, let's pretend we only have a few identities and they completely overlap with each other. So our political identity, our religious identity, our friend identity, like everything that we really care about, let's say it all aligns and they all agree with each other, and they actually will reinforce each other. So we know that as you have more identities that share meanings with each other, they all become more collectively more important to you. So that, again, that's one of these pressure points that I think is important to be aware of, is just the reinforcement aspect. And this also comes down to the type of information we consume, the people we associate with. So as this becomes more and more reinforced, our source of self-esteem is dependent on a very narrow lens of meanings that support this very narrow lens of identities. So if we experience any information that challenges anything of these handful of identities that we have, it feels like a complete personal attack to who we are as human beings. Conversely, if we have a very diversified set of identities, and let's say we have political identity, religious identity, but they don't completely overlap. We have friends that don't necessarily share our beliefs. We volunteer somewhere that's completely apolitical, and that's really meaningful to us. Then if we experience some piece of information that challenges, let's say, our political identity, it doesn't feel like our entire sense of self is being attacked, because we have this broad reservoir of self-esteem to use and derive our social support from. So that's how I think about what I think about like a social identity literacy or a psychological literacy, of just trying to understand where our biases come from in the first place. Because we know we have confirmation bias and stuff like that, but where do those confirmation biases originate from? And I think by having a more diverse set of identities, we can protect ourselves from some of these biases that correspond to how we process information.
That's really interesting. And I wonder, like, it sounds great. I wonder how easy or difficult that would be for a person to do, right? Because it's like, your identity. I don't know how, someone could, I don't know how much control we have over that. Sarah, were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to say the same thing. I'm like, that sounds good in theory, but I feel like people kind of can cognitively think like, oh, it's a good idea to diversify my identity, but it's another thing entirely to actually implement those changes. And I'm wondering, Matthew, if you have any tips for listeners on like how might one diversify their identity like portfolio, for like lack of a better way of phrasing that.
Yeah, and that really speaks to the intersection between this micro level and this big structural level on even the opportunities we have to meet different people and expand our identity network. In the United States, there's a lot of discussion of this lack of third spaces, where we often go home, we go to work, but there's not really like a third space we go to where we can meet lots of different people. One of the few places that people do this is college and stuff like that, where you're forced to meet lots of different people. But even a lot of people don't go to college, and even college is only, a handful of years. So there's not a lot of opportunities to really meet lots of different people. So that's what I think about as an opportunity for different organizations to fill this need. And I've actually seen more groups pop up that try to facilitate this. Different nonprofits, different companies that really try to facilitate people getting together and meeting people outside of their bubble. And I think there is a real need for this, especially in our digital age where we're really isolated and on our screens the whole time. It's like now just like meeting people is like a luxury that people want to seek out.
Sure.
And so, community building is key. And I think that's really how I would argue, fix a lot of these issues of polarization and susceptibility to misinformation because of these narrow sets of identities. So it can be, seeking out these groups that try to facilitate discourse, but also personally, it can be something as simple as joining a new hobby, taking up something new. I mean, I'm a big proponent for sports because I think sports is a great way. Pickleball, yes, exactly.
Yes.
So I
rowing. I'm on a rowing team.
Right. Awesome. Yeah. So I love sports, and I play pickleball. So I play with a lot of people that I know have very different political perspectives than I do. But when we're on the same court, same team, we have an opportunity to get to know each other outside of thinking about each other as these political entities. And I think that it's a really great opportunity that people can seek out. And there's some research that it kind of is interesting. There's one study that came out a few years ago, having people basically be these digital pen pals, where they would talk about their interests. And they found that people who found a common interest with each other, it could be like TV shows, sports, those who agreed on that common interest, and then when they started talking about politics, they were much less polarized than those who did not find a common interest first. So even though they had disagreement on politics, the group that found a common interest in a shared identity to bond over became much less polarized in their discussion and had a lot less animosity towards the person, even though they had this different political identity.
I love that. And I totally can believe that.
So just starting to wrap up here, we are going to wrap every episode with this question, which is, here it is. What is something giving you hope in the public health and science world? So we want to end on an optimistic note. What's something giving you hope right now?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. And for me, what gives me hope is the type of work that you both are doing. And this collection of people, really amazing, brilliant people working together to try and solve the challenging issues we face today. I think as we have seen these public health challenges over the years, one of the things that gives me the most hope about it is people coming together and working together to solve these problems collectively, because it's simply too big of a problem and an issue for any one person or even one group to try and fix. We need to really work together and support each other. And that's what gives me hope, was when I see this happen. And that allows me to see a horizon in the future that I think we can work together and, hopefully become stronger and learn from each other. So that's what gives me hope, despite the challenging times we face today.
You are a ray of freaking sunshine. I want to bottle you up. And you know what? Just a final thing in like 30 seconds, Matthew, we want everyone to go out and buy your book. Remind us the title and what folks can expect when they read your book.
Yeah, so the title of my book is Misguided: Where Information Starts, How It Spreads, and What to Do About It. And I focus a lot on the social psychology of how we form different beliefs and how we process information differently. And I also talk a lot about both from the micro level, the psychological level, but also like the structural issues. I talk about social media and also media literacy as well, since I think both those types of literacies are important, both the psychological literacy that we've been discussing, but also giving people the skills and tools to evaluate information more critically. So yeah, it's been an exciting journey to write, and I think people would find it interesting if they're curious about how we process information differently.
I'm so excited for you. Again, we will include a link in our show notes. Dr. Matthew Facciani is also on social media, Threads, Blue Sky, Instagram, all the places, I think. Definitely go follow along. Everywhere. Unlike Sarah. Who is our social media virgin, blissfully unaware of what is going on out there. But
I prefer Ghost.
Oh, yes, Ghost mode. So I just get all the daggers and all. No, I'm just joking. Anyway, no, seriously, Matthew, sincerely, thank you so much for joining us today and for all that you're doing in this space. You are such an important voice and really a ray of sunshine. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sarah, you want to take us home?
I would love to. Thanks for tuning in, you guys. Season 6 is going to be a good one. We hope you learned a thing or two. Please join us next week on your trusted source for no nonsense, just science.